You're lying in bed right now, maybe scrolling, maybe staring at the ceiling, and you're afraid of something. We all are. Bills, health, the future, normal modern fears. But here's the thing. Your ancestors were terrified too, for hundreds of thousands of years, and the things that scared them shaped everything about you, your brain, your body, the way you think and feel and react to the world. This isn't about jump scares or monsters. This is about the deep fears that made us human, the ones that got into our DNA and never left. Think about this. Modern humans appeared about 300,000 years ago. For most of that time, we lived in small groups, 20 people, maybe 50. We had fire, we had tools, we had language. But we were vulnerable in ways that are hard to imagine now. You couldn't lock your door at night. There were no doors, you couldn't call for help, no phones, no neighbours down the street. You couldn't even see what was 10 feet away once the sun went down. The darkness was absolute. No street lights, no phone screens, no distant glow from the city. When the fire died, you were in blackness so complete you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and things moved in that darkness. Real things, predators with better night vision than you, animals that could smell you from a mile away, creatures that saw you as food, but also other things you couldn't explain, sounds with no source, shapes that vanished when you looked directly at them, feelings of being watched. Your ancestors developed fears that kept them alive. Fear of the dark, fear of being alone, fear of strangers, fear of disease, fear of the unknown. These weren't irrational. These fears made sense. They were survival tools. The people who didn't have these fears, they didn't survive long enough to become your ancestors. The nervous person who jumped at shadows lived longer than the brave person who investigated every noise. The cautious person who avoided sick people survived the plague that killed the friendly person who helped everyone. Your anxiety isn't a malfunction, it's an inheritance, a gift from people who were terrified and survived anyway. We're going to explore these fears, one by one, starting with the oldest and most fundamental, the fear that shaped human consciousness itself. We'll look at what they were actually afraid of, not what we imagine from movies, the real things, the specific dangers that haunted their nights and shaped their days. We'll see how these fears changed as humans changed, how they evolved as we built civilizations, how some disappeared and others transformed into new shapes. And we'll find something unexpected. These ancient terrors, the ones that feel so primitive and irrational now, they're still with you, still influencing your choices, still shaping your dreams. Because evolution is slow. Your body and brain are still calibrated for a world that doesn't exist anymore. A world where darkness meant death, where strangers meant danger, where being alone could be fatal. You carry 300,000 years of fear in your bones, and understanding where it came from might help you understand yourself a little better. So let's start with the oldest fear, the one that came before all the others, the one that's still there when you turn off the lights, the fear of darkness itself. Darkness wasn't just scary to early humans, it was the primary threat to survival, the thing that defined their entire existence. Here's what that actually meant. When the sun went down, you became prey. Not metaphorically, literally. You went from being a hunter to being hunted. Your advantage disappeared with the light. During the day, humans had tools, weapons, intelligence. We could see threats coming. We could coordinate. We could plan. We were dangerous. At night, we were nearly blind. Our eyes are terrible in low light compared to most predators. A lion can see 6 times better than you in darkness. A leopard can see 8 times better. An owl can see 100 times better. Think about what that means. You're sitting by a fire. 20 feet away, complete blackness. You can't see anything, but something out there can see you perfectly, watching, waiting. Your ancestors lived with this every single night for hundreds of thousands of years. The fear wasn't irrational, it was mathematics. Darkness meant you lost your primary survival tool, your vision, your ability to see danger coming. And danger came. Often, cave hyenas, saber-toothed cats, short-faced bears that stood 12 feet tall, dire wolves hunting in packs. All of them had better night vision. All of them saw humans as food. We have evidence of this, lots of it. Archaeologists find human bones with tooth marks, gnaw marks from predators, skulls crushed by powerful jaws, bodies dragged into caves and eaten. One site in South Africa shows this clearly. Swartkrans Cave. Over 1 million years of occupation. Hundreds of early human remains. Many show leopard damage. Leopards would wait in trees, drop onto humans walking below, drag them up into branches, eat them slowly over days. We know this because we found the bones, still in the trees, tooth marks matching leopard teeth. Exactly. This wasn't rare. This was normal. Being killed and eaten by predators was a common way to die. The darkness made it worse. Much worse. During the day, you could see the leopard in the tree. You could avoid that path, you could throw rocks, you could group together and make noise. At night, you walked right under it. Never knew it was there until claws sank into your shoulders. So humans developed an intense fear of darkness. It got wired deep into the brain, into the parts that react before you can think. You still have this. You know you do. Walk into a dark room, your heart rate increases slightly, your breathing changes, your muscles tense, you're more alert, more jumpy. That's not learned, that's inherited. Your body remembers what darkness meant. Here's what makes it worse. Darkness doesn't just hide predators, it hides everything. You can't see the cliff edge. You can't see the snake. You can't see the hole you're about to step in. You can't see your own people. Being separated from your group at night was often fatal. You couldn't find your way back. You couldn't call for help without attracting predators. You were alone in the dark with things that wanted to eat you. This created another fear. The fear of being alone. The fear of separation. They're connected, both rooted in darkness. Your ancestors who stayed close to the fire survived. The ones who wandered off didn't. Simple as that. We can see this in how human children behave. Every culture, every time period. Children are afraid of the dark. They don't want to be alone at night. They want to stay close to adults. Nobody teaches this. It's automatic, built in. Because for most of human history, a child alone in the dark was a dead child. The fear kept them alive. Fire changed everything, but not completely. Humans controlled fire at least 400,000 years ago, maybe longer. We're not sure exactly when. But fire created a bubble of safety, a circle of light in the darkness. Predators mostly avoided it. Not always, but mostly. So nighttime became divided into two zones. Inside the firelight, relatively safe. Outside the firelight, death. This created new behaviours, new fears. You didn't leave the fire circle at night, ever. Not for any reason. Because stepping outside meant entering the death zone. If the fire started to die, panic. Real panic. Because the circle was shrinking. The darkness was closing in. Keeping the fire going became the most important task. More important than food. More important than comfort. Because without fire, you were exposed. We see this in every hunter-gatherer society ever studied. Fire is sacred. Fire is life. Letting the fire die is the worst failure. This isn't superstition, it's survival memory, coded into culture because it kept people alive. But here's where it gets interesting. Fire didn't eliminate the fear, it just pushed it back. You're sitting by the fire, warm, safe, but you can hear things in the darkness. Sounds, movement, eyes reflecting the firelight. You know something is out there, watching, waiting for the fire to die, or for someone to step outside the circle. This created a new kind of fear, not the fear of darkness itself, the fear of what lived in the darkness. The known threats were bad enough. Lions, hyenas, bears. But at least you understood them. You knew what they were. But there were other things. Things you couldn't explain. Sounds with no source. Shapes that moved wrong. Feelings of being watched when nothing was there. Your ancestors didn't have scientific explanations. They didn't know about wind patterns creating sound. They didn't know about optical illusions. They didn't know about how fear affects perception. They just knew that sometimes things happened in the darkness that made no sense, and the things that made no sense were the scariest. This is where supernatural fear comes from. Not from religion, not from stories, from actual experiences in the darkness that couldn't be explained. Someone disappears at night, never found. What took them? Something did. But what? The whole group hears a sound, a scream, a roar, something they've never heard before. What made it? They don't know. Someone sees a shape, moving through the trees, not like any animal they know. What was it? No answer. These experiences accumulated over thousands of years, passed down through stories, through warnings, through fear. Don't go into the darkness. Something is out there, something dangerous, something we don't understand. And they were right. There was something dangerous, many things. Some they knew about, some they didn't. The fear of darkness became the foundation for other fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of the supernatural, fear of death itself. Because darkness was where death came from, literally. Most predator attacks happened at night. Most accidents happened in darkness. Most people who died alone died in the dark. Darkness and death became linked in human consciousness. They still are. We still associate darkness with danger, with evil, with death. Even though most of us are perfectly safe in the dark now, you lock your doors at night. Why? Because nighttime feels more dangerous. Even in a safe neighborhood, even when statistics show crime rates are similar day and night, you're more nervous walking alone at night, even on a familiar street. Your body tenses, your awareness increases, you walk faster. That's the ancient fear, still operating, still protecting you from threats that don't exist anymore. But the fear served another purpose too. It brought people together. Nighttime was social time. Everyone gathered around the fire, close together, talking, telling stories, bonding. You couldn't wander off. You couldn't work alone. You couldn't do individual tasks. The darkness forced you to be together. This shaped human social behavior. We became more social at night, more connected, more dependent on each other. Some anthropologists think this is when language really developed. Around the fire, in the darkness, when there was nothing else to do but talk. The darkness that threatened to separate us actually brought us together, made us more human, more connected. Stories developed around fires, myths, legends, ways to explain the darkness and what lived in it, ways to make it less scary, but also ways to remember the danger, to teach children, to keep everyone cautious. The best stories were scary stories, because scary stories kept people alert, kept them from getting too comfortable, kept them from forgetting what the darkness really meant. We still tell scary stories at night, around campfires, in dark rooms, before bed. Why? Because something in us still needs to remember, still needs to respect the darkness. Your ancestors who feared the darkness survived. The ones who didn't fear it enough died. That's why you're here. That's why you still feel it. That little spike of fear when you turn off the lights. That urge to move quickly through dark spaces. That preference for sleeping with some light source nearby. It's not weakness. It's wisdom. Inherited wisdom from people who survived the real darkness. The darkness that had teeth and claws and hunger. The darkness that made us human. We talked about darkness, about predators, about the terror of night. But there was something else early humans feared. Something that shaped them differently. Being alone, not just at night, anytime, anywhere. For early humans, separation from the group meant death. Not eventually, soon, within days, sometimes hours. You couldn't survive alone. You just couldn't. The math didn't work. Human babies are helpless for years. Human adults need cooperation to hunt, to gather, to defend against predators. One person alone, dead quickly. So we've covered the things that hunted humans. The big cats, the hyenas, the wild dogs, all the animals that saw us as food. But here's what's strange. Those weren't the most dangerous predators. The most dangerous predator was other humans, and early humans knew it. We have evidence of violence going back almost as far as we have evidence of humans. Skulls with trauma, bones with cut marks, bodies buried in ways that suggest murder. Violence between human groups is ancient, older than agriculture, older than cities, older than civilization itself. Let me show you what I mean. In 1964, archaeologists found something at a site called Jebel Sahaba in Sudan, a cemetery, about 13,000 years old, 59 bodies buried there. More than 40% showed signs of violent death, arrow wounds, spear wounds, blunt force trauma to skulls, men, women, children, all killed violently. This wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. Maybe several massacres over time. These people were hunter-gatherers. No cities, no armies, no organised warfare as we think of it. Just small groups of humans killing other small groups of humans. And this pattern repeats, over and over, across continents, across thousands of years. In Kenya, archaeologists found a site called Nataruk, about 10,000 years old. At least 27 people killed. Some had stone projectile points still embedded in their bones. Others had crushed skulls. One woman was heavily pregnant when she died. In Germany, a site called Talheim, about 7,000 years old. 34 people killed with stone axes, thrown into a pit together. In France, a cave called Fontbrégoua, about 6,000 years old. Evidence suggests cannibalism, human bones with cut marks, broken open for marrow, cooked. This isn't rare, it's everywhere we look. Violence between human groups appears to be one of the oldest patterns in our species, and early humans lived with this knowledge. Other humans were dangerous, maybe more dangerous than any animal, because animals were predictable. A lion hunted at certain times, in certain places. You could learn its patterns, avoid it. But humans? Humans were smart. Humans planned. Humans held grudges. Humans could track you for days, wait for the right moment, attack when you were vulnerable, and you couldn't always tell which humans were threats. That group you saw yesterday, maybe they're friendly. Maybe they'll trade with you, share information about water sources or game. Or maybe they'll wait until you're asleep and kill everyone. You had no way to know. This created a different kind of fear. Not the immediate terror of a predator in the dark, but a constant background anxiety, a wariness of strangers. We still have this. You feel it when you see someone unfamiliar in your neighbourhood at night. when you hear footsteps behind you on an empty street. That's not a modern invention. That's ancient. That's your ancestors whispering warnings. Be careful. Watch. Stay alert. Other humans are dangerous. Now here's what's interesting. This fear shaped human evolution in specific ways. It made us incredibly good at reading faces, at detecting tiny changes in expression, at picking up on social cues, because you needed to know, is this person safe? Are they lying? Are they planning something? Your life depended on reading people correctly. Human faces have more muscles than any other primate. We have incredible range of expression, and we're incredibly good at reading those expressions, even across cultures, even in people we've never met before. Show someone a photo of a face, any face, from any culture. They can tell you if that person is angry, sad, happy, afraid. We're born knowing this. Babies respond to faces immediately, prefer them to other patterns. This isn't learned, it's built in. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, reading faces correctly meant survival. Miss a sign of aggression, you might die. Miss a sign of deception, your whole group might die. So we evolved to be obsessed with faces, with expressions, with the tiny movements that reveal intention. We see faces everywhere, in clouds, in wood grain, in random patterns. That's not a bug, that's a feature. Better to see a face that isn't there than miss one that is. The fear of other humans also shaped our social behavior in deeper ways. It made cooperation within groups essential. You needed your group. They were your protection against other groups. So humans became incredibly social. We form tight bonds. We feel loyalty. We're willing to sacrifice for our group, but we're also incredibly tribal. We divide the world into us and them, into safe and dangerous. And we're quick to dehumanize outsiders, to see them as threats, as less than human. This isn't something we learn. It happens automatically. Show people images of outsiders, and different parts of their brain light up than when they see members of their own group. We literally process strangers differently, as potential threats first, as humans second. This kept our ancestors alive. In a world where other humans were genuinely dangerous, where resources were scarce, where violence was common, this made sense. But we still carry it, even though the world has changed. Even though we live in cities with millions of strangers, that ancient fear is still there, still shaping how we think, how we feel, how we react. Think about modern politics, modern conflicts, the way we divide into groups, the way we demonize the other side. That's not new. That's ancient. That's the same pattern playing out again. We're still afraid of other humans, still dividing the world into us and them, still seeing outsiders as threats. The context changed. The fear didn't. Now let me tell you about something else. Something that made this fear even more complex. Early humans didn't just fear strangers, they feared exile, being cast out from their own group. Because exile meant death, almost certainly. Without your group, you had no protection, no one to watch your back, no one to share food when hunting was bad, no one to care for you if you got sick or injured. Humans are social animals. We evolved to live in groups. Our survival strategy depends on cooperation. So being alone wasn't just scary, it was a death sentence. This fear shows up in our psychology today. Social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Being excluded hurts. Literally, your brain processes it the same way as being injured. Why? Because for your ancestors, social rejection often led to physical death, so your brain learned to treat it as an emergency, as a threat to survival. We still feel this, deeply, constantly. The fear of being judged, of being rejected, of not fitting in. That's not insecurity. That's evolution. That's an ancient survival mechanism still running. Your ancestors who didn't care about social rejection, who didn't fear exile, they got cast out. And they died. And they didn't pass on their genes. You're descended from the ones who cared desperately about staying in the group, who felt social pain acutely, who did whatever it took to belong, so you carry that fear, that need for acceptance, that terror of being alone. It's in your DNA, literally. This also explains something else about human behavior, why we conform, why we follow social rules even when they don't make sense, why we're so sensitive to what others think. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, breaking social rules could get you exiled, and exile meant death. So we evolved to be incredibly attuned to social norms, to group expectations, to what's acceptable and what's not. We police ourselves constantly, monitoring our behavior, adjusting to fit in. This isn't weakness. This isn't lack of individuality. This is a survival strategy that worked for 300,000 years. Your ancestors who couldn't read social cues, who didn't conform, who didn't care about the group's opinion. They got kicked out, and they died alone. You're descended from the ones who fit in, who followed the rules, who desperately wanted to belong. So when you feel anxious about what people think of you, when you worry about fitting in, when you adjust your behavior to match the group, that's not you being weak, that's you being human. That's an ancient survival mechanism doing exactly what it evolved to do. Keep you alive by keeping you in the group. Here's something else. The fear of other humans created a strange paradox. Humans are simultaneously the most cooperative and the most violent primates. We work together better than any other species. We share food. We care for sick and injured group members. We raise each other's children, but we also kill each other. Constantly, throughout history. No other primate does this. Chimps have violence between groups, but nothing like human warfare. Nothing like human genocide. We're uniquely capable of both extreme cooperation and extreme violence. And both come from the same source, the fear of other humans. We cooperate with our group because we need protection against other groups. We're violent toward outsiders because they threaten our group's survival. It's two sides of the same coin. The same psychology that makes you loyal to your friends makes you suspicious of strangers. The same instinct that makes you protect your family makes you fear outsiders. You can't have one without the other. They evolve together, they're linked. This is why human history is full of incredible acts of kindness and horrific acts of violence, often by the same people, often at the same time. Soldiers who risk their lives to save their buddies and then commit atrocities against enemies. That's not hypocrisy. That's the same psychology operating in different directions. Love for the in-group, fear of the out-group, both ancient, both powerful, both still with us. And here's the thing, this fear of other humans shaped our intelligence itself. Some researchers think social competition drove human brain evolution more than anything else. Not tools, not hunting, not fire, other humans. The need to navigate complex social relationships, to predict what others would do, to form alliances, to detect deception, to cooperate when necessary and compete when needed. This required massive brain power, way more than hunting or gathering. So our brains grew and grew and grew until we had brains 3 times larger than our body size would predict. Brains that consumed 20% of our energy, brains that made childbirth dangerous and childhood long, all because we needed to outsmart other humans. The predators in the dark were scary, but they were predictable. They followed patterns. Other humans, they were unpredictable. creative, deceptive. You needed a massive brain just to survive them. So in a weird way, our intelligence comes from fear, from the need to predict and understand other humans, from the constant threat of violence. We're smart because we're dangerous to each other, and we needed to be smart to survive each other. That's the paradox at the heart of being human. We're capable of incredible love and incredible violence, profound cooperation and profound cruelty. And it all comes from the same place, from living in groups, from needing each other, from fearing each other, from 300,000 years of knowing that other humans were the most dangerous thing in your world. That fear made us who we are. It's still making us who we are. Every time you read someone's expression, every time you worry about fitting in, every time you feel loyalty to your group or suspicion of outsiders, that's your ancestors. That's ancient fear. That's the thing that kept them alive, and it's still keeping you alive. In different ways, in a different world, but the fear is the same, the pattern is the same. We're still afraid of each other, still watching each other, still trying to figure out who's safe and who's dangerous, still carrying the knowledge that humans are capable of anything, both beautiful and terrible, and will carry it forever. Because it's written into our DNA, into our brains, into the very structure of who we are. The most dangerous predator was never the lion in the darkness. It was always the human across the fire. So we've talked about predators, about violence between groups, about exile and loneliness. But early humans feared something else, something invisible, something that could kill you without warning, disease. And here's what's terrifying. They didn't understand it. At all. You could be healthy in the morning, dead by nightfall, and nobody knew why. Someone in your group gets sick, fever, weakness, strange marks on their skin, then they die. 3 days later, someone else shows the same symptoms, then another person, then another. What's happening? You have no idea. Is it something they ate? Something in the water? Did they anger the spirits? Is someone cursed? You don't know. You can't know. You don't have the framework to understand contagion, bacteria, viruses, infection. All you know is people are dying, and it might spread to you. This created a specific kind of terror, the fear of invisible threats, of things you couldn't fight or avoid because you couldn't see them coming. Let me show you what this actually meant. Around 5,000 years ago, plague appeared in human populations. We know this from DNA analysis of ancient skeletons. The bacterium Yersinia pestis shows up in bones from this period. This is the same disease that caused the Black Death in medieval Europe, the same plague that killed a third of the population, but it existed much earlier, spreading through early farming communities, killing people who had no idea what was happening. Imagine being in one of those communities. Your neighbour gets sick, high fever, swellings in the neck and armpits, delirium, then death. You don't know about bacteria, you don't know about fleas, you don't know about rats carrying infection. All you see is death spreading from person to person, like some invisible evil moving through your group. What do? You can't fight it. You can't see it. You can't predict who it will take next. Some groups probably tried isolation, separating sick people from healthy ones. This sometimes worked, not because they understood disease, just because distance helped. Other groups might have tried rituals, prayers, sacrifices, anything to stop the invisible killer. Nothing worked consistently. People kept dying, and this happened over and over. Different diseases, different times, same terror, smallpox, measles, tuberculosis, cholera, all spreading through early human populations, all invisible, all deadly. We have evidence of tuberculosis in human bones going back 9,000 years. evidence of leprosy going back 4,000 years. These diseases lived with humans for thousands of years before anyone understood what they were. Your ancestors watched people die from invisible causes constantly for thousands of generations. This shaped human psychology in specific ways. It made us afraid of contamination, of things that seem wrong or dirty or spoiled. You feel this today. That disgust when you see mouldy food, when you smell something rotten, when you see bodily fluids. That's not learned. That's built in. That's an ancient defense against invisible threats. Your ancestors who weren't disgusted by rot, who ate spoiled food, who didn't avoid sick people. They died from food poisoning, from infection, from diseases they couldn't see or understand. You're descended from the ones who felt disgust, who avoided contamination, who had strong gut reactions to things that seemed wrong. So you carry that deep in your brain, an automatic response to potential threats you can't see. Show someone a picture of mouldy food. Their face wrinkles. They pull back. They feel disgust. Immediately, without thinking. That's 300,000 years of evolution. That's your ancestors' fear of invisible death. Here's something else. Early humans couldn't tell the difference between contagious diseases and other problems. Someone has a seizure. Is that a disease? A spirit possession? A curse? Someone acts strangely, talks to themselves, sees things that aren't there. Is that sickness? Magic? Punishment from the gods? They had no framework to separate physical illness from mental illness from spiritual problems. It was all mysterious, all potentially dangerous, all potentially contagious. This created deep confusion and deep fear. Because if you don't understand what causes something, you can't predict it, you can't prevent it, you can't protect yourself. You're just vulnerable, hoping it doesn't happen to you. Some researchers think this is where a lot of supernatural beliefs came from, the need to explain invisible threats. If people are dying and you don't know why, you create explanations, spirits, curses, angry gods, evil magic, not because you're stupid, because you're human, because humans need explanations. We can't handle random chaos, so we create stories, patterns, reasons. Even wrong explanations feel better than no explanation. At least then you have something to do. Rituals to perform, rules to follow, ways to feel like you have some control. This is still with us. When something bad happens, we need to know why. We create narratives. We find patterns even in randomness. That's not modern anxiety, that's ancient. That's the same psychology that made your ancestors create explanations for plague and illness and death. We still do it, we just have better explanations now, usually. But the need is the same. The fear of invisible, unexplainable threats is the same. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The fear of contamination didn't just apply to disease. It extended to anything that seemed wrong or dangerous or polluted. Dead bodies, blood, waste, certain animals, certain places. Early humans developed elaborate rules about what to avoid, what not to touch, what not to eat, where not to go. These rules varied between groups, different cultures, different taboos, but every group had them. Why? Because some of those rules probably helped. Avoiding certain foods prevented poisoning. Avoiding dead bodies prevented disease. Avoiding waste prevented infection. But they didn't know which rules actually helped, so they kept all of them. Better safe than sorry. This created what we call purity rules, ideas about clean and unclean, pure and polluted, safe and dangerous. These rules show up in every culture, every religion, every society. Don't eat this, don't touch that, wash after this, stay away from that. Some of it made medical sense, most of it didn't. But it all came from the same place. The fear of invisible contamination. The need to control threats you couldn't see. We still follow these rules, even when they don't make sense, even when we know better. You wouldn't eat food that fell on the floor, even if the floor is clean, even if you just mopped it. Why? Rationally, it's fine, but you feel wrong about it, contaminated. That's not logic. That's ancient fear. That's thousands of years of avoiding invisible threats. Your brain learned that contamination spreads, that things can be polluted in ways you can't see, that safety means following rules about purity. So you still follow them, automatically, without thinking. Here's another thing. Disease didn't just kill individuals, it could wipe out entire groups. If plague hit a small band of 20 people, and half died, the group might not recover. Too few people to hunt, to gather, to defend territory, to reproduce. The survivors might have to join another group, or die trying to survive alone. This made disease a group-level threat, not just personal. So groups developed collective responses, shared rules, common practices. Everyone washes before eating. Everyone avoids certain things. Everyone follows the same taboos. This created social pressure. If you broke the rules, you weren't just risking yourself, you were risking everyone. So groups enforced purity rules strictly, punished violations, exiled people who wouldn't comply, because one person's contamination could spread to the whole group. One person's rule breaking could kill everyone. This is still with us. Think about how people react to someone who violates hygiene norms, the disgust, the anger, the desire to exclude them. That's not just personal preference. That's ancient group survival instinct. That's the fear that contamination spreads, that one person's behavior threatens everyone. We feel it powerfully, immediately, without thinking. Show people a video of someone violating hygiene rules. Their disgust response is stronger than almost any other emotion, stronger than fear, stronger than anger. Because for your ancestors, contamination was deadly, and people who didn't follow the rules endangered everyone, so your brain treats it as a serious threat, a group-level emergency, even now, even when the actual danger is minimal. Now let me tell you about something specific: water. Early humans were terrified of bad water, and they should have been. Waterborne diseases killed constantly. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, parasites. Drink from the wrong source, and you died, slowly, painfully. But here's the problem. You couldn't tell good water from bad water by looking at it. Clear water could kill you. Murky water might be safe, you had no way to know. So groups developed rules. Drink from this stream, not that one. This water is safe. That water is cursed. Sometimes these rules made sense. The safe stream was upstream from the camp. The dangerous one was downstream, contaminated by waste. But nobody understood why. They just knew. This water kills people. That water doesn't. So they created stories. Spirits live in that stream. The gods blessed this one. That one is haunted. Not because they were primitive, because they needed explanations, because invisible bacteria wasn't available as a concept. The stories worked. They kept people away from contaminated water. They saved lives. Even though the explanation was wrong, the behavior was right. This pattern repeats throughout human history. Wrong explanations, right behaviors, because evolution doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. If believing in water spirits keeps you alive, that's good enough. Your genes get passed on. We still do this. We avoid things that feel wrong even when we can't explain why. We follow rules that don't make logical sense but feel important. That's not irrationality. That's ancient wisdom. That's thousands of generations of survival experience coded into your instincts. Sometimes your gut knows things your brain doesn't. Sometimes the old rules work even when you don't understand them. Here's something else about disease. It created the concept of quarantine. Long before anyone understood contagion, humans knew that sick people were dangerous. That disease spread from person to person somehow. So they isolated the sick, kept them away from healthy people, sometimes permanently. We have evidence of this going back thousands of years. Leper colonies, plague houses, isolation huts. This was brutal. Imagine being sick, weak, scared, and your own people force you away, make you live alone, sometimes leave you to die. But it worked. It slowed disease spread. It saved the group. So humans kept doing it, even though it was cruel, even though it meant abandoning people you loved, because the alternative was everyone dying. This created a terrible moral calculus. Individual versus group. Compassion versus survival. Do you care for the sick and risk infection spreading? Or do you isolate them and save the group? Different cultures chose differently, but every culture faced the choice, and the fear behind it was the same. The invisible threat, the disease you couldn't see or understand or fight, just spreading, killing, unstoppable. We faced this recently, during the pandemic, the same questions, the same fears, the same moral choices. Isolate or gather, individual rights or group safety, compassion or caution. Nothing new, same pattern, same ancient fear. Because disease hasn't changed, it's still invisible, still spreading, still killing. We just understand it better now, sometimes. But the fear is the same, the vulnerability is the same. We're still small groups of humans trying to survive invisible threats, still making impossible choices, still afraid of contamination we can't see. The tools changed, the fear didn't. Your ancestors knew this fear intimately, watched people die from invisible causes, developed rules and rituals and taboos to protect themselves, and those rules got into your DNA, into your brain, into your automatic responses. When you feel disgust at spoiled food, that's them. When you avoid contamination, that's them. When you follow hygiene rules without thinking, that's them. Still protecting you, still warning you, still afraid of invisible death. After thousands of years, after all our knowledge, after all our medicine, the fear remains, built into who you are, because it kept your ancestors alive, and it's still keeping you alive, in different ways, in a different world. But the same fear, the same vigilance, the same ancient terror of threats you cannot see. So we've talked about visible threats, predators, other humans, things you could see coming. But early humans faced something worse, something they couldn't see at all. Poison, not disease. We covered that. This is different. This is contamination you could smell and taste. Food that could kill you. Water that looked fine but wasn't. Plants that seemed edible but destroyed your organs. Your ancestors had to navigate a world where eating the wrong thing meant death, and they had no chemistry, no labels, no way to test things safely, just trial and error meant dying. Think about what this actually meant in daily life. You're hungry, you find a plant with berries, red ones, they look good, they smell sweet. Should you eat them? Maybe they're fine. Maybe they'll kill you in 6 hours. Maybe they'll make you so sick you can't move while predators circle your camp. You have no way to know. This wasn't rare. This was constant. Every new food source was a gamble. Every unfamiliar plant was a potential killer. We know this from modern data. There are over 400,000 plant species on Earth. About 300,000 of those are poisonous to humans to some degree. That's 3/4 of all plants. Most of what grows will hurt you if you eat it. Your ancestors figured this out the hard way, by watching people die, by learning which plants to avoid, by passing down knowledge through generations. But here's the thing, that knowledge wasn't written down, it was oral. passed from parent to child, from elder to young, if your group lost its elders, if disease killed the people who knew. That knowledge died with them, and then you had to learn again, from scratch, by watching people die. This happened over and over throughout human history. Groups losing knowledge, relearning it, losing it again. Each time, people died from eating the wrong things. Let me give you a specific example. Cassava. Cassava is a root vegetable, grows in tropical regions, looks like a potato. Millions of people eat it today, but raw cassava contains cyanide, enough to kill you. You have to process it correctly or it's deadly. Indigenous groups in South America figured this out thousands of years ago. They developed elaborate preparation methods, soaking, fermenting, cooking in specific ways. These methods remove the cyanide, make cassava safe. But how did they figure this out? How many people died before someone discovered the right process? We don't know, but the answer is probably many. Because there's no obvious reason to soak and ferment something for 3 days before eating it, unless you've seen what happens when you don't. This pattern repeats with dozens of foods. Acorns need leaching, certain beans need boiling. Some mushrooms are safe only if cooked properly. Your ancestors learned all this. Through death, through watching people get sick, through careful observation over generations, and they passed it down, through stories, through rules, through taboos. Don't eat this, don't touch that. Prepare this food this way, not that way. These weren't superstitions, these were survival instructions, hard-won knowledge written in blood. We still follow some of these rules, even when we don't know why. You wouldn't eat a mushroom you found in the woods, even if it looked fine, even if you were hungry. Why? Because somewhere in your cultural memory is the knowledge that wild mushrooms kill people, that you need expert knowledge to identify safe ones. That's ancient wisdom. That's your ancestors' fear speaking through you. Here's something else about poison. It taught humans to be suspicious of new foods. We call this food neophobia, the fear of new foods. It's built into human psychology. Show a toddler a new food. They refuse it. They make faces. They won't try it. That's not learned behavior. That's instinct. That's evolution protecting them. Because for most of human history, new foods were dangerous. The safe foods were the ones your group already ate, the ones that hadn't killed anyone yet. So children evolved to be suspicious, to refuse unfamiliar foods, to stick with what's known. This kept them alive. The curious kids who tried everything, they died from poison. Their genes didn't continue. You're descended from the cautious ones, the suspicious ones, the ones who said no to unfamiliar berries. That's why trying new foods feels uncomfortable, why unfamiliar cuisines take getting used to, why your brain resists change in diet, not because you're picky, because you're carrying 300,000 years of survival instinct. Now let's talk about water, again, but differently this time. Earlier we covered disease in water, bacteria you couldn't see. But early humans also faced chemical contamination, minerals, metals, natural toxins, water that looked clean but made you sick, water that tasted fine but damaged your organs over time. In volcanic regions, water can contain arsenic, sulfur compounds, heavy metals from rock formations. Drink this water regularly and you get sick. Slowly. Your hair falls out. Your skin develops lesions. Your organs fail, but you don't know why. You're just getting weaker, and so is everyone else in your group who drinks from the same source. Some groups figured this out. They noticed patterns. People who drank from this spring got sick. People who drank from that one stayed healthy. So they developed rules. Sacred springs, forbidden springs, water sources marked as good or evil. The explanation was wrong, but the behavior saved lives. We found evidence of this in archaeological sites, settlements abandoned near certain water sources, groups moving despite good hunting and gathering nearby. Why? Probably because the water was killing them, and they noticed, and they left. But they didn't understand. They just knew. This place is bad. This water is cursed. We need to go. Their ignorance saved them. Their willingness to trust instinct over logic kept them alive. Here's where it gets really interesting. Taste. You have 5 basic tastes: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, umami. 4 of those evolved to detect poison. Bitter taste detects alkaloids, plant toxins that can kill you. Most poisonous plants taste bitter. Sour taste detects acids, spoilage, food going bad, salty taste monitors mineral balance. Too much salt is toxic. Umami taste detects protein, but also signals when protein is breaking down. Rotting. Only sweet taste exists purely for nutrition, to find sugar, energy. Everything else? Poison detection. Your tongue is a chemical testing lab, evolved over millions of years to keep you from eating things that will kill you. When you taste something bitter, you want to spit it out immediately. That's not preference. That's your brain screaming danger. When you smell something sour and rotten, you feel nauseous. That's not weakness. That's protection. These responses are automatic, hardwired. You can't turn them off. Show someone a picture of spoiled food and their face wrinkles in disgust. Their stomach turns. They feel sick just looking at it. That's your poison detection system, still working, still protecting you, after hundreds of thousands of years. But here's the problem. This system isn't perfect. Some poisons don't taste bitter. Some toxic plants taste sweet. Some deadly mushrooms smell pleasant. Evolution did its best. But nature is tricky. Some things evolved to fool your senses, so your ancestors needed more than taste. They needed cultural knowledge, shared learning, passed down through generations. This is where food taboos come from. Rules about what not to eat. Every culture has them. Don't eat this animal. Don't eat this plant. Don't combine these foods. Some of these rules made medical sense. Avoiding certain shellfish prevented poisoning. Avoiding certain meats prevented parasites. Others made no sense at all. But people followed them anyway. Why? Because the cost of breaking the rule might be death, and the cost of following it was just inconvenience. Better safe than sorry. Better to avoid a safe food than risk eating a poisonous one. This created conservative food cultures, groups that ate the same things for thousands of years, that resisted change, that viewed new foods with deep suspicion. Not because they were closed-minded, because they were trying to survive. Let me tell you about one specific poison that shaped human history: ergot. Ergot is a fungus. It grows on rye and other grains. It contains alkaloids similar to LSD. Eat bread made from ergot-contaminated grain and you get ergotism, also called St. Anthony's fire. Symptoms include hallucinations, convulsions, gangrene, death. In medieval Europe, ergot poisoning killed thousands. Whole villages went mad. People saw demons, had seizures. Their limbs turned black and fell off. But this happened long before medieval times too. Ergot has infected grain for thousands of years. Imagine being an early farmer. You harvest your grain, you store it, you make bread, and then people start hallucinating, seeing things, acting crazy, dying. What's happening? You have no idea. Is it demons, possession, a curse? You don't know about fungus, you don't know about alkaloids, you just know your food is killing people. Some groups probably figured it out. They noticed patterns, bad harvests, wet years, grain that looked different. They developed rules. Don't store grain this way. Don't harvest in certain conditions. Throw away grain that looks wrong. These rules saved lives, even though the explanation was wrong. This is a pattern. Wrong explanations, right behaviors. Your ancestors survived not by understanding, but by noticing patterns, by following rules that worked even when they didn't know why. We still do this. We follow food safety rules we don't fully understand. We avoid things that seem wrong even when we can't explain the danger. That's not ignorance. That's wisdom. That's thousands of generations of experience coded into culture. Now here's something most people don't think about. Cooking. Cooking is poison defense. Heat destroys toxins, breaks down alkaloids, kills parasites, makes dangerous foods safe. But early humans didn't know this. They just knew cooked food made them less sick. So they cooked everything, even things that didn't need cooking. Better safe than sorry. This changed human evolution. Cooked food is easier to digest, provides more calories, allows smaller guts and bigger brains. But it started as poison defense, as a way to survive in a world full of things trying to kill you. Your ancestors who cooked their food lived longer, had more children, passed on their genes. You're descended from the cautious ones, the ones who cooked everything, the ones who didn't take chances. That's why raw food makes you nervous, why rare meat feels risky, why you wash vegetables even when they look clean. Not because you're paranoid, because you're carrying ancient survival instinct. Here's the last thing about poison. It created the concept of medicine. Because some poisons, in small doses, are helpful. They kill parasites, reduce pain, fight infection. Early humans figured this out. Slowly, carefully, through experimentation. They learned which plants helped, which ones hurt, which ones did both depending on the dose. This knowledge became shamanic tradition, healer knowledge, passed down through specialists. But it started with poison, with fear, with the need to understand what was killing people. Every medicine tradition begins with identifying poisons, learning what they do, finding ways to use them safely. We still do this. Most modern medicines are derived from toxins, plant alkaloids, fungal compounds, snake venoms. We just understand them better now. We measure doses, we test effects, we know mechanisms, but the principle is the same. The line between poison and medicine is dosage and knowledge. Your ancestors learned this through death, through careful observation, through thousands of years of trial and error. They passed it down through apprenticeship, through ritual, through stories about what to avoid and what to use, and you carry that in your food preferences, in your disgust responses, in your automatic reactions to things that seem wrong. When you smell something rotten and feel sick, that's them. When you refuse to eat something that looks off, that's them. When you follow food safety rules without thinking, that's them. Still protecting you, still warning you, still afraid of invisible poison. After all this time, after all our science, after all our understanding, the fear remains, built into your senses, written into your instincts, because it kept your ancestors alive, and it's still keeping you alive, in different ways, in a safer world, but the same fear, the same caution, the same ancient terror of things that look safe but aren't. Let's shift the picture. Up to now we've talked about invisible dangers, poison, disease, things hidden inside food or water. But what about things you could see, plain as day? Sometimes, what you see is even more intimidating than what you can't. Open spaces, heights, wide, endless land with nowhere to hide, high cliffs and steep drops that make your stomach twist. These might seem harmless now, but for early humans they were loaded with risk and discomfort. Imagine it. You're standing at the edge of a cliff. The ground feels solid, but when you look down, your knees go weak. There's no guardrail, just open air, and the fall is deadly. Or you're on a grassy plain, nothing but sky and distant trees. No rocks to duck behind, no thick brush to hide in. You feel exposed, watched. There's nowhere to run if something comes for you. Where do these feelings come from? They're not just quirks, they're ancient instincts. Our deepest fears are shaped by the landscapes our ancestors survived in and the dangers they faced there. Let's start with heights. Most people today say they're afraid of heights, at least a little. Even if you're not, you probably feel nervous when you look over a balcony or stare down from a tall building. Your body reacts. Heart rate goes up. Palms sweat. You might even feel dizzy, like the ground is pulling you. This isn't random. It's built in. Here's some evidence. Babies who can crawl will avoid crawling over a clear glass panel placed over a drop, even though the glass can hold their weight. This visual cliff experiment has been repeated for decades. The result is always the same. Even young humans are wired to avoid heights. We sense the danger right away. Why? Because falling from a height meant almost certain death or disability for early humans. Before modern medicine, a bad fall was a life sentence. Broken bones didn't heal right. Infection set in. If you couldn't walk or move, you couldn't keep up. You couldn't help gather, hunt, or protect yourself. You became a burden to the group, or you were left behind. So over many generations, people who were a little more cautious around heights survived more often. They passed on their genes and their caution. But it's not just about cliffs or mountains. Think about trees. Early humans spent time in trees, especially before we became fully ground-dwelling. Some primates today live almost their whole lives in the branches, but even tree dwellers fall sometimes. That's one reason primates, including us, have such good depth perception. Our eyes are in the front of our heads, giving us 3D vision. This helps judge distance. It's handy for throwing, but it's even more important for climbing and not falling. Even now, most people have a little voice in their head that says, "Don't get too close to the edge. You don't need to be told, your body just knows." Now let's look at open spaces. This is something people don't talk about much, but it's shaped human life in big ways. The technical word is agoraphobia, the fear of open or crowded spaces. But long before there were cities or crowds, open spaces alone made people uneasy. Walk out into a wide, empty field, and you might feel that old discomfort start to creep in, even if you can't explain why. Here's why. Visibility goes both ways. Sure, you can see far, but so can everything else. You're visible to predators. You're visible to other humans who might not be friendly. There's nowhere to hide, nowhere to take cover. You're just a moving target. Archaeologists have found that ancient human camps were rarely out in the open. Most were tucked near water, in valleys, under cliffs, or by thick forests. Shelter mattered. Even when there was plenty of food on the open plains, people chose places with natural cover. Think about the caves of Europe. People didn't just use them for art. They lived there, even though caves can be damp, cold, and dark. The trade-off was safety. A cave has a single entrance. You can watch it. Nothing can sneak up behind you. The walls block wind and rain. You're hidden from sight. The same goes for rock shelters, for overhangs, for dense woods. Even temporary hunting camps were set up where visibility was limited from at least some sides. This wasn't random. It was strategic. It was about survival. Let's take a closer look at grasslands. The African savanna is often called the cradle of humanity. Early humans evolved there, and the landscape is still there today. Wide plains, scattered trees, tall grass. But the savanna is not just a beautiful place. It's full of threats. Lions, leopards, wild dogs, hyenas, all these animals hunt by sight. The open plains give them a clear view of anything moving. Early humans moving across these plains had to be alert all the time. They travelled in groups. They kept to the edges when possible. They watched the grass for movement. Even now, people living in these areas develop a kind of landscape reading skill. They notice patterns in the grass, changes in the wind, the sound of birds that signal something is wrong. We see this in traditional hunting methods. Hunters use the landscape to their advantage. They travel along riverbanks, stay close to trees, move at dawn and dusk when predators are less active. Archaeological finds back this up. Ancient footprints found in places like Latoli, Tanzania, show groups walking together, not alone. The prints are close together, suggesting people stayed tight, probably for safety. It's not just fear, it's strategy, it's adaptation. Let's talk about the savanna hypothesis. This is an idea from anthropology. It says humans evolved to prefer certain landscapes, open woodlands, not deep forests or empty plains. Our brains are drawn to places where you can see a little distance but still have cover. There's some cool evidence for this. When people are shown pictures of different landscapes, most choose ones that look like the African savanna. Scattered trees, open grass, water in the distance, maybe a hill or two. This is true for people all over the world, no matter where they grew up. Why? One theory is that these landscapes feel safe. You can spot threats coming, but you can also hide if you need to. It's the best of both worlds. This preference shows up in city planning too. Think about parks, big windows, tree-lined streets. We like a mix of open and closed. Not too exposed, not too boxed in. But this is just a theory. Not everyone agrees. Some point out that humans also thrived in forests, mountains, and deserts. Maybe our landscape preferences are more flexible than we think. Still, the evidence is there. People have always tried to balance visibility and safety. Let's look at another angle. Fear of getting lost. Open spaces present a different kind of danger. You can lose your sense of direction. No landmarks, no clear path home. Early humans didn't have GPS or even maps. They used the sun, stars, and familiar land features to navigate. If you got lost on the open plain, you were in real trouble. No water, no shelter, no help. This happened often enough to leave a mark on human memory. There's a reason stories about getting lost in the wilderness are so common, even today. There's deep anxiety in not knowing where you are or how to get back. Some cultures developed techniques to deal with this. The San people of southern Africa could read tracks in the sand. The Inuit in the Arctic memorized every bump and dip in the land. Polynesian navigators learned the stars and the currents. But the average person, travelling alone in a wide open space, was vulnerable, and the feeling of exposure, of being too visible, too alone, was real. Let's circle back to heights for a moment. Heights weren't just scary at cliffs. They showed up in trees, in rocks, in riverbanks. Early human children learned quickly not to play too close to edges. Falls were common, and the results were often deadly. Archaeologists have found ancient skeletons with healed bone fractures, evidence of people who survived a fall but not without a cost. Some lived with pain the rest of their lives. Some couldn't keep up with the group and died later. Even now, injuries from falls are a leading cause of death in many parts of the world. In places without modern hospitals, a broken leg or hip can be fatal. So, our caution isn't weakness, it's survival. But there's another side to this. Humans also learn to use heights and open spaces for their advantage. Lookouts, watchtowers, high ground. People who could climb or reach a high spot could see danger coming before anyone else. They could warn the group. This is why so many ancient settlements are built on hills or cliffs. Think of Machu Picchu high in the Andes, or the cliff dwellings of the American Southwest, or the hill forts of Europe. These places were hard to attack. They offered a wide view of the land around them. Even before building real settlements, humans chose high ground for their camps when they could. It gave them time to react if something, or someone, was approaching. But this only worked if the group was big enough to defend the spot. A single person on a hill is an easy target. A group can fight back or escape together. So, again, it's about balance. Use the land to your advantage, but never get too comfortable. Let's talk about the psychological side. Where do these feelings live in us today? Many people have dreams of falling, or dreams of being lost in a wide empty place. Some experts think these dreams are ancient leftovers, reminders from a time when these dangers were real and constant. Even in modern life you see traces of this. Think about how people feel in wide, empty spaces. Some love it, but many feel uneasy. The same goes for tall buildings, bridges, or mountain trails. You might enjoy the view, but part of your brain is on alert. There's also the idea of prospect and refuge. This is a fancy way of saying people like to see, but also to hide. We want a view, but we want a wall at our back. This shows up in how we pick seats in restaurants, where we place our furniture, even how we camp in the woods. It's not just habit, it's instinct. Let's look at animal behavior for comparison. Deer feed in open fields but stick close to the edge of the forest. Rabbits dash into the brush at the first sign of trouble. Birds perch where they can see predators coming, but they keep cover nearby. Humans aren't so different. We learned from watching animals. We copied their caution, their use of the land. And sometimes we learned from their mistakes. A stampede of antelope means a predator is near. Birds flying up in a burst mean something's wrong. Early humans paid attention. The land spoke, and they listened. Here's something that might surprise you. Some of the oldest human art is found deep inside caves, far from natural light, in places that are hard to reach. Why go there? Why risk getting lost or trapped? Some think it was about safety. The deeper you go, the fewer threats from outside. Some think it was ritual, places set apart where only a few people went. Others say it was about claiming space, marking territory in a dangerous world. Whatever the reason, it shows that humans were always balancing risk and reward. Sometimes you faced your fear of darkness and closed spaces to gain something else, meaning, safety, or a sense of control. But most of the time, daily life happened where you could see the sky but hide from danger, not too open, not too closed. Let's talk about migration and travel. Early humans moved a lot. They followed herds, seasons, and food supplies. This meant crossing open land, mountains, rivers, and deserts. Every step was a gamble. Groups that survived learned to adapt. They travelled at certain times. They avoided open spaces during the heat of the day. They moved in silence, watched for tracks, kept children close. And every crossing of a wide, open plain felt risky. You couldn't see what was coming from beyond the horizon. You just hoped you'd make it to the next patch of trees or rocks. Let's bring in some numbers. Archaeologists have found ancient footprints in places like White Sands, New Mexico. These tracks are over 20,000 years old. They show people, sometimes children, crossing wide, muddy flats, following herds of mammoths, carrying babies, sometimes being followed by predators. It's not just a story. It's written in the ground. Real people walked across open land, risking everything. What about modern times? Why do some people love wide open spaces? Why do others avoid them? Part of it is personal experience. Part of it is culture. But some of it goes deeper. Some people feel calm in the desert. Others feel exposed. Some love mountain heights. Others freeze at the thought. It's a reminder that we're not just shaped by our own lives, but by the lives of those who came before us. Here's something beautiful about this. Despite all the risk, humans learned to cross open land, climb heights, and face exposure. They made it work. They built tools, learned to read the sky, invented new ways to travel. They turned danger into opportunity. But our bodies, our instincts, remember what it was like when every open field and high place was a test of survival. That's why these feelings linger. Not because we're weak, but because we're connected to a story that stretches back farther than we can really imagine. Next time you feel your stomach twist at a balcony, or your heart pound crossing a wide empty field, remember, you're not alone. You're carrying the wisdom and the caution of people who faced real danger and survived. So, when you choose a seat with your back to the wall, when you pause at the edge of a drop, when you glance over your shoulder in an open field, you're not being silly. You're just listening to a voice that's been there forever. It's the same voice that helped your ancestors choose where to sleep, where to walk, where to build their lives. That's the connection. That's the evidence, not written on stone or bone, but living on in us, in the small choices, the gut feelings, the things we can't explain. From the edge of a cliff to the middle of a grassy plain, those ancient risks shaped us. And even now, in a world of steel and glass, their memory lives on. Now, let's follow that thread from the world of the living to the world of the dead. Let's talk about something that's always been there, no matter where or when people have lived. The end of life. Death. It doesn't matter how much you prepare, how many dangers you avoid, or how clever your group is. Everyone faces it. There's no escaping it. And for early humans, death wasn't just a fact of life. It was a mystery, a puzzle that left people uneasy and searching for answers. Imagine yourself in a world without science. No hospitals, no doctors who can explain what went wrong. Someone in your group gets sick or is injured and then they're gone. Sometimes it's quick. Sometimes it takes days or weeks. Maybe it's a child. Maybe it's an elder whose stories everyone knows by heart. The body grows cold. The breath stops. Something changes, but nobody really knows what. What happens next? That question has haunted people for as long as we have records, maybe even longer. The fear of dying is not just about pain or losing your own life. It's also about what comes after. Is there anything, or is it just nothing? This is the ultimate unknown. Let's look at what the evidence shows. Archaeologists have found some of the earliest human burial sites. These aren't just bodies left where they fell. They're carefully placed. Sometimes in caves, sometimes in shallow graves, sometimes with objects, tools, shells, red ochre, a kind of clay used as paint, bright and strange. One of the oldest known burials is from a cave in Israel called Kafsa. The skeleton is about 100,000 years old. The body was placed in a pit with deer antlers, not food, not something useful, just antlers, laid across the chest. It's hard to know what the people were thinking, but this wasn't an accident. It looks like they were marking the spot, maybe to help the person in the next world, or maybe they were trying to keep something away. Another famous site is Shanidar Cave in Iraq. Neanderthals lived there. Scientists found several skeletons buried with care. One even had pollen from flowers around the bones. Some people think this means the group placed flowers in the grave. Maybe it was a gesture of kindness, or maybe a way to honour the dead. No one really knows for sure. Early burials show that humans, and even other human relatives, were thinking about death in a special way. Not just moving a body out of the way, but treating it with respect, or maybe with fear. Maybe both. Why would they do this? Here's where things get interesting. When someone dies, their body changes quickly. The colour fades, the skin gets cold, the eyes lose their spark. For early people, this must have looked strange and scary. The person you knew was gone, but their body was still there. It made people wonder, where did the person go? Some scientists think that's where stories about spirits, souls, or ghosts come from. When you see a friend die, you can't help but ask, is something left? Does anything remain once the body is gone? That's where rituals come in. If you look at burial sites from different times and places, you see patterns. People dug graves. Sometimes they covered the bodies with stones, maybe to keep animals away, but maybe for something else. In some places they painted bones with red ochre. Maybe they thought this would help the dead move on, or keep them from coming back. There are places where skeletons are found curled up, almost like they're sleeping. Other times the bones are arranged in a special way, or the head is separated from the body. Sometimes people broke the bones after death. Maybe they thought this would keep the spirit from wandering. Or maybe it was a way to honour the dead, to mark the change from life to something else. It's not just burials. Early people left marks on the world that seem to be about death. Cave paintings show animals being hunted, but sometimes there are shapes that look like people falling, or changing, or surrounded by strange patterns. Some think these are about journeys, maybe even journeys to the land of the dead. What about fear? Was death something to be scared of or just accepted? It's hard to know for sure, but there are clues. In some cultures, people made masks or covered faces with clay or paint. Maybe it was to scare away spirits. Maybe it was to hide from the dead themselves. Think about the stories people tell even today. Ghosts, spirits, ancestors watching from the shadows. Almost every culture has these stories. They go back a long way. It looks like people have always tried to make sense of what happens after death, and to keep some kind of control over it. Let's talk about the evidence for caring for the dead. In Sungir, Russia, archaeologists found a grave from about 34,000 years ago. 2 children, buried side by side. They were covered in thousands of ivory beads, painstakingly made and sewn onto clothes. There were spears made of mammoth bone, carved and polished. This wasn't just burying bodies. This was a serious ritual. It must have taken weeks, maybe months to make all those beads. Why put so much effort into a burial? Maybe it was a way to show love. Maybe it was about status, marking these children as important. Or maybe it was about fear, making sure the dead didn't return, or that something bad wouldn't happen to the living. There's another angle. Sometimes you find burials with nothing special at all, just a body, buried away from the main camp, with no objects or signs of ritual. Maybe these people died from disease, or were seen as dangerous or unlucky. Maybe the group wanted to keep them separate, to avoid bad luck or trouble from restless spirits. And then there's the evidence for something called secondary burial. This is when a body is buried once, then dug up later, and the bones moved or rearranged. Why do this? Some think it was to keep the ancestors close. Others say it was about breaking the connection between the living and the dead. Maybe they thought the spirit couldn't rest until the bones were moved. Or maybe it was just about cleaning up the site. The evidence is all over the place. There's no single answer. But the pattern is clear. Death made people uneasy. It pushed them to invent rituals, to mark the change from life to death, and maybe to keep the unknown at bay. Now let's think about what death meant for the living. When someone died, the group lost a member. That could mean less help with hunting, gathering, or defense. If it was a child, the loss was obvious. If it was an elder, the group lost memory and knowledge. Stories, skills, and wisdom died with them. This made death not just an emotional event, but a practical problem. Groups had to decide what to do next. Who would fill the gap? How would they keep going? Sometimes the answer was to honour the dead, hoping they would help from beyond. Sometimes it was to forget quickly and move on. There's a theory that the first religions started with death, the need to explain what happens after life, to keep the memory of loved ones alive, to handle the fear of loss. If you look at ancient grave goods, things buried with the dead, they often point to a belief in some kind of afterlife. Weapons, tools, food, things you'd need for a journey. Even today, people leave flowers, notes, or favourite objects on graves. The instinct is old. It's about connection, and maybe about hope. Let's look at another side. In some places, people didn't bury their dead at all. They left bodies out in the open, sometimes on platforms, sometimes just on the ground. Scavengers, birds, animals would clean the bones. Later, the group might gather the bones and place them somewhere special. This kind of sky burial is still practiced in parts of the world today. Why do this? Some think it was about returning the body to nature. Others say it was about keeping the dead separate from the living. Maybe it was about letting the spirit rise with the birds. Or maybe it was just practical. Hard ground, no tools for digging. There's even evidence of cannibalism in some ancient sites. Broken bones, marks from cutting. Was it about survival, or was it a ritual way to honour the dead? Some scientists think it was both. In hard times, eating the dead could mean the group survived. But there are stories where eating a piece of the dead was about taking in their strength or memory. It's uncomfortable to think about, but for early humans, life and death were close together. The line was thin. Sometimes rituals were about survival more than belief. Let's talk about fear of the dead themselves. In some places, graves are covered with heavy stones. Sometimes the body is pinned down with rocks or stakes. Maybe this was to keep animals away. But some think it was about keeping the dead from rising. There are stories from all over the world about the restless dead. People who come back, who haunt the living, who bring bad luck or sickness. Even today, you see echoes of this. Stories about zombies, vampires, spirits that wander at night. They all come from the same root, the worry that death isn't the end. In early villages, people sometimes buried the dead under the floor of their houses. Maybe it was to keep them close, maybe it was to keep an eye on them, or maybe it was just the easiest spot to dig. But it meant you were living right on top of the bones of your parents, your children, your friends. That must have changed how people thought about home, about family, about the line between the living and the dead. Now let's consider what death did to the mind. The knowledge that life ends shapes how people see the world. For early humans, every day was risky. You could be healthy at sunrise, gone by sunset. The fact that death could come at any time made people value the present. It also made them look for meaning, for patterns, for ways to control what they couldn't understand. That's probably why you see rituals around death in every culture, every time period, sometimes simple, sometimes complex, sometimes joyful, sometimes full of fear. Let's look at a few examples from different parts of the world. In the Gravettian culture, about 30,000 years ago in Europe, people buried their dead with beads, bones, and even animal teeth. These weren't just random objects, they took time to make. Some graves have hundreds, even thousands of beads. This shows planning, care, and maybe belief in something more. In the Middle East, at a site called Jericho, people made plaster masks and placed them over the faces of the dead. The real skull was underneath. These masks had shell eyes and painted features. Maybe it was a way to keep the memory of the person alive. Maybe it was about protection, or maybe it was a way to keep the spirit from wandering. In the Americas, some native groups practiced bundle burials. The bones were cleaned, wrapped in cloth, and placed in caves or special houses. The bundles were visited, cared for, sometimes even carried from place to place during migrations. All these examples show that early people didn't just let death happen and forget. They tried to manage it, make sense of it, and keep some kind of connection with those who were gone. But there's another side to all this. Death was also a time of danger. The process of dying could bring sickness. The body could attract predators. The group had to act quickly, sometimes in the dark, sometimes in the rain or cold. They had to balance respect and fear with practical needs. And sometimes death was a warning. If someone died suddenly, the group might move camp, thinking the place was cursed or dangerous. Sometimes they burned the spot or left offerings to make peace with whatever caused the death. This mix of respect, fear, and practical need made rituals complicated. Sometimes the group acted out of love, sometimes out of fear, sometimes both at once. Let's talk about children and death. In many ancient sites, you find small graves, sometimes with toys, beads, or animal bones. The loss of a child must have been especially hard. Maybe these burials were a way to comfort the living as much as to honour the dead. There's something touching about this. Even in the hardest times, people tried to find ways to remember, to show love, to keep hope alive. Now let's pull back and look at what all this means. Death wasn't just an end. For early humans, it was a challenge, a question with no easy answer. It made people invent rituals, create stories, and build connections that lasted beyond a single lifetime. It's easy to think we're different now, but we're not. The same questions echo in modern life. What comes after? How do we remember? How do we say goodbye? The evidence from ancient graves, rituals, and stories shows that people have always wondered about these things. They used what they had, stones, beads, paint, songs, to make sense of the biggest mystery. And maybe that's part of what makes us human. The need to remember, the worry about what comes next, the hope that there's more. So if you ever find yourself thinking about death, about what it means, about what comes after, you're not alone. People have been asking these questions for as long as there have been people. The evidence isn't just in bones or stones. It's in the stories we tell, the songs we sing, the way we remember those who are gone. Death shaped early humans in ways we're still trying to understand. It made us careful, but also creative. It made us sad, but also hopeful. It made us search for meaning in a world that doesn't always give answers, and that's something that just stays with you. Now let's move from dangers as big as life itself to threats that are much, much smaller. The tiny creatures that have always haunted our nights. Let's zoom in now, way down, to threats almost too small to notice. For early humans, some of the most dangerous enemies were tiny. Think about snakes and spiders. These aren't massive creatures stalking through the grass. They're quiet, hidden, and deadly in a completely different way. Picture yourself walking through tall grass or reaching into a dark place for food. You can't see what's there. There's a sudden sting, a sharp pain, and you pull your hand back fast. Maybe it's just a scratch. Maybe it's something worse. The pain spreads. Your heart starts racing. You feel dizzy or your arm swells up. In a world without medicine, you don't know what's happening. You just know it feels wrong. Now let's talk about snakes. Not all are dangerous, but the ones that are, well, they can end a life in minutes or hours. The earliest people lived in places full of snakes. Africa, Asia, even parts of Europe had species with strong venom. Some hid under rocks, some waited in trees, others slid quietly through the grass, almost invisible. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Today, in some parts of the world, snake bites still kill over 100,000 people each year. That's with hospitals, anti-venom and all our modern tools. For early humans, the risk was much, much higher. No one really kept records back then, but the danger was clear. Let's picture a scene. It's late afternoon. Someone in your group is out gathering roots, maybe looking for tubers or berries. They move a rock, and suddenly a snake strikes. There's a shout, maybe a cry for help. The group rushes over, but what can they do? If the bite is from a cobra or viper, the symptoms come fast. Swelling, pain, trouble breathing, sometimes paralysis. Maybe someone tries to suck out the poison. Maybe they tie a vine above the bite. Maybe they try to cut the wound and let it bleed. But none of these methods really work. The truth is, most people would just wait, hoping for a miracle. Sometimes the person survives. Sometimes they don't. The fear didn't just come from dying. It came from not knowing which snakes were dangerous. Many look similar. Some are harmless, some are deadly. Early humans learned to avoid certain colours or patterns, but mistakes happened. Children especially were at risk. Small hands, curious minds, and a world full of hidden dangers. Here's something interesting. Scientists have looked at snakebite patterns in modern hunter-gatherer groups. Among the San people in southern Africa, for example, snake bites are a real problem. Most adults know how to spot dangerous snakes, but even so, accidents still happen. Kids are told stories about snakes from a young age, stories that teach them to be careful, to watch where they step, to listen for the faint hiss or the rustle in the leaves. Stories like these go back a long way. In some African cultures, snakes are seen as spirits, protectors, or bringers of bad luck. In Australia, Aboriginal groups have the rainbow serpent, a powerful figure in their stories who controls water and life. Snakes show up in myths from India to the Americas. Sometimes they're wise, sometimes evil, sometimes both. Why do snakes get such a strong reaction? Here's one theory. Humans are especially good at spotting snakes. Even tiny children, too young to have seen a real snake, react quickly to pictures or toys that look like snakes. Their eyes snap to movement, their bodies tense up. Some scientists think this is hardwired, a deep, ancient response passed down from people who survived by noticing snakes before it was too late. There's some real evidence behind this idea. Psychologists have done tests with babies and young kids, show them a picture of a snake and a flower, and they notice the snake right away, even when they've never seen one before. This doesn't mean every person is terrified of snakes, but it does mean our brains are set up to pay attention. Let's look at some numbers. In India today, around 50,000 people die each year from snake bites. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's between 20,000 and 30,000. That's with modern help. For early people, the risk was everywhere. If you lived in a group of 20 or 30, losing even 1 or 2 to snake bites each year would be a big blow. Now think about spiders. They're even smaller. Most are harmless, but a few can cause real trouble. Black widows, brown recluses, funnel web spiders. These names mean something now, but for early humans there were no field guides. Just pain and sometimes death. Spider bites are sneakier than snake bites. You might not even feel the bite at first. Hours later, you notice swelling, redness, maybe a fever. Some bites lead to skin damage. Some affect nerves or muscles. In the wild, even a small injury can get infected. If you can't walk or use your hand, you can't hunt, gather or defend yourself. That puts everyone at risk. But most spiders don't kill. In fact, they help by eating mosquitoes, flies, and other pests. Still, people react to them in a powerful way. Even today, many people have a deep dislike of spiders, sometimes called arachnophobia. It's one of the most common fears around the world. Why is that? Scientists think it might be the way spiders move, quick, unpredictable, with long legs and silent steps. Or maybe it's their shape, so different from mammals or birds. But there's another reason. For early people, the risk of a bad bite, even if rare, was serious enough to make everyone cautious. Better to be safe than sorry. There's a story from the Amazon where some of the world's biggest spiders live. The Goliath bird-eater, for example, can be as big as a dinner plate. Its bite isn't deadly, but it looks terrifying. Local groups know to leave it alone. They teach children which spiders to avoid, passing down knowledge from generation to generation. In Australia, funnel web spiders are famous for their strong venom. Their bite can kill a grown person in less than an hour. Before anti-venom was invented in the 1980s, several people died every year. Aboriginal Australians had ways of dealing with spiders, special plants to treat bites, or stories that warned children to stay clear of certain burrows. Let's shift to another kind of small hidden danger, scorpions. These are found in deserts and dry places, from Africa to the Middle East to the Americas. Some scorpion stings are just painful, others can be deadly, especially for children. Like spiders, scorpions hide in cracks, under rocks, or in shoes left out overnight. In ancient times, stings must have been common. Imagine sleeping on the ground, or in a simple shelter. You wake up, reach for your sandals, and get stung. The pain is instant. Sometimes swelling follows. Sometimes the victim has trouble breathing. Without medicine, the only thing to do was wait and hope. Old texts from Egypt talk about scorpions as symbols of danger. The goddess Serket, for example, was said to protect people from scorpion stings. In Mesopotamia, clay tablets show scorpion men, half human, half scorpion, guarding the gates of the underworld. These stories show just how much these little creatures got into people's minds. Let's look at how early humans tried to protect themselves. One method was careful watching. People learned to shake out sleeping mats, check shoes, and avoid putting hands where they couldn't see. Children were taught to look before stepping over logs or reaching into holes. In some places, groups cleared the ground around camps to make it harder for snakes and scorpions to sneak in. There's also evidence of early medicine. Some groups used herbs or clay to treat bites and stings. In parts of Africa, people used plant ashes or special roots. In Australia, certain leaves were crushed and placed on wounds. These remedies didn't always work, but they show that people tried everything they could. Another strategy was storytelling. Myths, songs and warnings passed down knowledge. In some Australian groups, children were told stories about the death adder, a snake that moves slowly but strikes fast. The story made the danger clear without needing a real-life lesson. Over time, people developed rituals and charms. In India, people wore amulets to protect against snake bites. In the Americas, some groups painted symbols on their bodies or carried lucky objects. These things might not stop a snake or spider, but they gave people a feeling of control. Sometimes that's what matters most. Let's get into why these dangers shaped early humans so deeply. First, they forced people to pay attention to their surroundings, walking slowly, watching every step, listening for soft sounds in the grass. These habits saved lives. Over generations, groups that learned these skills did better. The knowledge stuck. Second, these small threats shaped where people lived and how they built shelters. Sleeping off the ground, using fire to keep animals away, clearing campsites. These weren't just about comfort, they were about survival. Even today, some houses in rural parts of the world are built on stilts to keep out snakes and scorpions. Now, you might wonder, were these dangers really that big a deal compared to lions or hyenas? The answer is yes, but in a different way. Big predators attacked rarely, and people could sometimes fight back or run away. Small threats, like snakebite or spider venom, struck without warning. They didn't care how strong you were. A single mistake could be deadly. Here's another angle. These dangers didn't just threaten individuals, they put whole groups at risk. If a leader or skilled hunter died from a bite, the group might struggle to find food or defend itself. If a child was lost, it was a blow to the group's future. Even a non-fatal bite could mean weeks of recovery, lost work and extra care from others. So how did these dangers change the way people thought? They made humans cautious. They taught quick learning and sharing of information. They inspired stories, art, and even religion. Snakes and spiders appear on cave walls, carved in bone, painted on pottery. Some early statues show people with snake heads or surrounded by twisting shapes. These weren't just decorations. They were warnings, reminders, maybe even prayers. Let's talk about one more thing: how these fears show up in the human mind. Psychologists have found that people everywhere react faster to snake and spider images than to other animals. Even in places where these creatures don't live, people still feel uneasy about them. That's strange, right? It suggests the reaction is built in, not just learned. Some scientists think this is because, for so long, these dangers shaped who survived and who didn't. The people who noticed snakes first, or who taught their children to be careful, lived longer. Over thousands of years, those habits became part of our brains. Today, you might never see a venomous snake, but the feeling sticks around. There's another detail. Not everyone is scared of snakes or spiders. Some people even like them. In some cultures, snakes are symbols of healing or rebirth. In ancient Greece, the staff of Asclepius, the symbol for medicine, has a snake wrapped around it. In India, cobras are worshipped in temples. But even in these places, people respect the danger. Let's look at how this shaped language. Many old sayings warn about snakes in the grass or spiders in the bed. In some places, to see a snake means to spot a hidden danger. To sleep with one eye open comes from the real need to watch for small threats at night. And then there's the role of dreams. Even today, people dream about snakes and spiders more than you'd expect. Sometimes the dream is about being bitten. Sometimes it's just a feeling of something slithering or crawling close by. These dreams are often linked to stress or worry. That's not a new idea. Ancient dream books from Egypt and Greece had whole sections about what it meant to dream of a snake or a spider. Usually it was a warning. Let's pull back for a second. Why does all this matter? Because it shows how deeply these small dangers shaped human life. Not just in the body, but in the mind. They changed how people moved, where they slept, what they taught their children, and even what they dreamed about. Even as people learned to control bigger dangers, making weapons, building shelters, lighting fires, these small threats stayed. You could scare away a lion, but a snake could still hide under your blanket. You could move your camp, but spiders and scorpions would move with you. No matter how much people changed their world, these dangers were never fully gone. And so, the habits stuck. The careful watching, the warnings passed down, the stories that still make us look twice when we see something move in the grass. It's easy to think that these are just animal stories or old fears, but they're more than that. They're part of what made people pay attention, learn fast, and care for each other. If someone was bitten, others had to help. If a child was stung, the whole group worried. These dangers reminded people that life was fragile, and that a little caution could mean the difference between life and death. Today, we rarely worry about snake bites or spider venom, at least in cities. But the echo is still there. You see it in movies, in stories, even in how people jump at shadows sometimes. It's a reminder that humans grew up in a world full of hidden dangers, and that some lessons never really fade away. There's something beautiful about this, honestly. The way people learn to watch out for each other, to pass down warnings, to invent stories that still make us pause. It's not just about being scared, it's about being aware of the world, of each other, of the little things that keep us safe. So, the next time you see a snake or a spider, or even just think about them, remember you're part of a long chain. People who watched, who learned, who survived. That's why you're here, and that's something worth holding on to. Now let's step back. We've looked at big threats and small ones, visible dangers and invisible ones. But what does it all add up to? What do all these fears mean when you put them together? Let's pull back from all those specific dangers for a second. The big hunting cats, the snakes in the grass, the sickness that spread through camps, the cliffs, the poisons. Step away from each detail and look at the bigger picture. There's a pattern here. All these dangers, as different as they are, share something important. They shaped how humans thought and acted, not just as individuals, but as a whole species. They shaped us. So what does it mean that humans have been surrounded by danger for so long? Why did these deep worries stick around even as the world changed? Why didn't people just ignore their worries and hope for the best? Here's the thing. Being afraid of things wasn't just some flaw or weakness. It was a tool, a basic, built-in alarm system, the stuff that made people jump at a shadow or freeze at a noise in the dark, the things that made hands shake and hearts race. Those were the same things that push people to survive. And survival, for most of human history, was never a sure thing. Let's get into why these emotions worked. Fear, in the broad sense, isn't just a feeling, it's a reaction. Your body gets ready, heart speeds up, eyes widen, muscles tense. You notice details you'd usually miss, the rustle in the grass, the shape that doesn't quite belong, the odd smell. All these changes happen in seconds, sometimes before you're even aware of them. And for most of history, that fast response could mean everything. See, the world wasn't safe for most people who ever lived. There were no locked doors, no police or fire alarms, no food in the fridge, no medicine cabinet, no ambulance a phone call away. Every day was about looking, listening, remembering, and reacting. People who noticed danger quickly did better. They lasted longer. They had more children. Over time, the families that survived were the ones with good instincts, not because they were brave, but because they were careful. You might wonder where these reactions even come from. Why do we get them in situations that aren't really dangerous anymore? Like feeling nervous during a speech, or jumping at a loud sound on a quiet night. The answer comes from how brains are built. The oldest parts of the human brain, the ones buried deep inside, are wired for quick action. They kick in before you can think things through. Scientists call this the fight or flight response. Your body gets ready to either run away or stand and fight. There's even more to it. Freeze, hide, or get help. These aren't things you decide to do. They just happen. Imagine walking in the forest. A branch snaps. Your body tenses up, heart thumping. Your eyes scan for movement. You hold your breath. You're ready for anything. Sometimes it's nothing, but sometimes it's a real threat. This reaction is so old you can see it in animals too. Watch a bird startle at a shadow, or a deer freeze with wide eyes before leaping away. The same thing happens in people. It's automatic. It's ancient. But here's something interesting. Humans didn't just rely on their own alarms. They started to warn each other. If someone spotted a lion, heard a hiss, or saw strange berries, they told others. Words, gestures, even just a look. Over time, these warnings became stories, rules, and customs. The group shared what worked and what didn't. This made people stronger together than alone. Let's look at how this played out. Imagine a small band of people living near a river. There are crocodiles in the water, snakes on the bank, and leopards in the trees. One person sees a pattern. The water is safest at dawn, but dangerous at dusk. They tell the others. Soon everyone knows to fetch water early. Or someone eats a new fruit and gets sick. After that, the whole group avoids that plant, and maybe even makes up a rhyme or a warning song about it. These small bits of knowledge added up one by one over generations. This is where fear turned into something powerful. Not just a reaction, but a way of learning and remembering. People started to connect danger to patterns. If you see these tracks, don't go that way. If you hear that sound, get behind something. If the sky looks a certain colour, stay close to camp. These warnings weren't just random. They were built from real experience. And it wasn't just about survival. It shaped culture. Songs, dances, art, and rituals often carried warnings or advice about danger. A painting on a cave wall might show a herd of animals, but also a hidden predator. A story told by the fire might sound fun, but it's really a lesson. Don't wander off. Don't pick up that snake. Don't eat those berries. These stories stick because they touch something deep inside. They speak to that old part of the brain that wants to stay safe. It's not just about telling people what to fear. It's about showing them how to respond. Take the example of fire. Fire can be deadly, but it can also keep wild animals away, cook food, and warm cold nights. People learn to respect fire, not just fear it. The same goes for animals, water, cliffs, and darkness. The lesson wasn't always run away. Sometimes it was, be careful, watch and wait, or learn more. There's another layer here. People started to plan ahead, not just react in the moment. They made traps, built fences, dug ditches and stacked rocks to keep danger out. They built shelters off the ground. They made tools to fight back or to warn others. All of this required more than just fear. It needed memory, teamwork, and imagination. Let's pause and look at some numbers. Modern scientists have studied how people today react to danger. For example, even children as young as 3 years old can learn to avoid things that made them sick before. In animal studies, rats and monkeys also remember where bad things happened and avoid those places. Humans took this even further. They started to use symbols, marks on a wall, knots in a rope, piles of stones, to remind themselves where danger was. And then, something even more important happened. Humans began to feel worried about things that hadn't happened yet. Not just what was in front of them, but what might come next. This is called anticipation. You might lie awake at night thinking about what could go wrong tomorrow. Maybe it's a storm or a rival group or a bad hunt. This kind of worry is uncomfortable, but it's also useful. It pushes people to prepare, to make plans, to carry extra food, or to set a guard at night. This ability to look ahead is part of what makes humans different from most other animals. It's not just about reacting. It's about imagining what could happen and doing something before it's too late. Sometimes this means worrying more than you need to, but sometimes it means surviving when others don't. Let's explore how this shaped the brain. Over long stretches of time, the people who worried a little more, who planned, who warned others, who hesitated before taking a risk, often made it through hard times. They passed on their habits to their children. Bit by bit, these habits became part of what it means to be human. Here's another angle. Humans also learned to balance worry with courage. If you never took risks, you couldn't hunt, explore, or find new food. Staying in one place forever wasn't an option. Sometimes people had to leave the safety of the fire and walk into the unknown. But when they did, they brought their habits with them, watching, listening, thinking ahead. Over time, this mix of caution and curiosity created something new. People spread across the world, from cold mountains to hot deserts, from thick forests to empty plains. They weren't the fastest or the strongest animals, but they were the best at paying attention, learning from mistakes, and sharing those lessons. Let's look at some examples from history. When people first arrived in Australia, they had to deal with strange animals and plants they'd never seen before. Some were dangerous, some were useful. By watching, testing, and teaching each other, people figured out what was safe and what wasn't. In the Arctic, people learned to spot thin ice, read the weather, avoid hidden crevices, and tell the difference between friendly and hostile animals. In the Amazon, groups learned which insects and plants could kill and which ones could heal. Everywhere people went, they brought their caution and their knowledge. It wasn't just about surviving. These habits changed how people thought about the world. They started to see connections between things. If the river floods, the snakes move. If you eat this plant, you get a stomachache. If the birds go quiet, something is hunting nearby. These connections became the start of science in a basic way. People asked questions, tested ideas, and remembered the answers. Here's where it gets even more interesting. As groups grew bigger and languages got more complex, warnings turned into rules and laws. Don't eat shellfish in the summer. Don't walk alone at night. Always check the ground before you sleep. Some of these rules seem strange today, but they had reasons behind them. They protected people from real dangers, even if the explanation wasn't clear. Sometimes these habits turned into rituals or taboos. For example, some groups wouldn't eat certain animals or would only drink from certain wells. Some wouldn't enter caves or would leave offerings to spirits or ancestors. Even if the original danger faded, the habits often stuck. They became part of culture, part of identity. And then there's the way people turned their worries into something creative. People didn't just warn each other. They made art, told stories, and sang songs about danger. They built myths about monsters, spirits, and heroes who faced the unknown. These stories made people feel less alone. They helped children learn what to watch for, and they gave adults a way to share hard-won wisdom. Let's talk about dreams for a moment. People everywhere have dreams about being chased, lost, or trapped. Ancient dream books, from Egypt to China, tried to explain these dreams. Often they were seen as warnings or messages, but now scientists think dreams are a way for the brain to practice dealing with danger. In your sleep, your mind runs through old problems and new ones, trying out different ways to respond. It's like a built-in classroom where you learn without even waking up. Now, here's something that might surprise you. Even today, when most people live in cities and face fewer natural threats, these old habits haven't gone away. That jumpy feeling when you hear a loud noise, the urge to check that the door is locked, the way parents watch their children near water or crowded streets. These are echoes of very old worries. They're not mistakes, they're reminders. Sometimes these reactions seem out of place. Getting nervous before a test or a big meeting isn't really the same as facing a lion. But the body doesn't know the difference. It uses the same tools: sweaty palms, fast heartbeat, racing thoughts. This isn't always helpful, but it shows how deeply these habits are built in. Here's another twist. People have also learned to manage and even use their worries. Athletes and performers talk about nerves before a big event. They use that energy to focus, to react quickly. Soldiers and explorers learn to trust their instincts, to listen to that prickly feeling that says, something's not right. Even in everyday life, a little caution can help people avoid mistakes. So why does all this matter now? Why talk about old worries and ancient dangers? Because these habits, watching, listening, remembering, are part of what makes people who they are. They connect everyone to the people who came before, who faced a world full of real risks and made it through. There's a lesson here. The things people worry about, even if they seem silly or old-fashioned, often have deep roots. They remind us that survival was never just about strength. It was about being aware, sharing knowledge, and caring for each other. It was about community and memory. Think about this. Every warning sign you see, every rule about safety, every bedtime story about monsters or heroes, that's a tiny piece of history. It's a reminder that people have always looked for ways to stay safe, to help each other, and to pass on what they learned. So next time you feel a chill walking through the woods, or hesitate before tasting something new, remember that these instincts are ancient. They're not just old leftovers. They're part of a story that goes back as far as people do. People learned to worry so they could live. They learned to share so they could thrive. This is honestly my favourite part of the story, the way people turned worry into wisdom and fear into caution. The way small habits added up to something huge. The way a single lesson, watch, listen, remember, could shape a whole future. And now, as you listen to these old stories, you're part of it too. You're linked to everyone who ever watched the shadows, told a warning story, or taught a child to pay attention. That's something beautiful if you ask me. Let's take a breath. We've looked at the dangers and the worries. We've seen how they shaped people, not just in the past, but right now, in every careful step and every story told. Next, we'll look at how all this adds up, not just to survival, but to something more. Acceptance, rest. A world where, even with all the old worries, people learn to find peace. Let's flip the lens for a minute and look at today. You might think, okay, sure, ancient humans had a lot to worry about, but we live in houses, drive cars, and have locks on our doors. We have medicine, lights, cameras, and alarms. That's true. But here's where it gets interesting. Those old habits, those deep alarms didn't just vanish. They shifted, changed shape, and settled into new corners of modern life. You see them every day, even when you don't realize it. Think about walking down a city street after dark. Your brain knows you're probably safe. There are streetlights, other people, maybe even security cameras. But suddenly you hear footsteps behind you. Your heart rate picks up. You glance over your shoulder. Your body tenses just for a second. Is it just someone walking home, or is it something else? You don't want to look scared, but you walk a little faster, keys in hand. That feeling, that burst of worry, comes from somewhere old, not from logic. Or picture this. You wake up in the middle of the night. Everything's quiet, but something feels off. Maybe you heard a noise, or maybe it was just a dream. You lie there, frozen for a second, listening hard. Your mind races. Was that the wind, the house settling, or something trying to get in? You know the odds are tiny, but your body is ready for action. That's the same alarm system people had when they slept in caves or tents. And here's something almost everyone can relate to, public speaking. You stand in front of a group, even if it's just a handful of people. Eyes turn toward you. Suddenly your mouth goes dry, your hands sweat, your mind blanks out. There's no real danger. No lion is going to leap out. But your body reacts as if there's a real threat. That's your ancient brain, still wired for social survival. Back in groups, being cast out could mean trouble, even death. Now it just means embarrassment, but the body hasn't caught up. Let's talk about the way people watch children. You see it at playgrounds, swimming pools, or busy streets. Parents and guardians scan the area, eyes darting around. If a child goes quiet or disappears from view, worry spikes. Even for a few seconds, the mind jumps to the worst possibilities. This isn't just modern anxiety. It's the same pattern as people watching over a camp at night, making sure no one wandered too close to the water or slipped away into the dark. You also see these old patterns in the way people treat food. Think about expiration dates, allergy warnings, and the way people sniff or taste something twice if it seems off. You might laugh at someone who's extra careful with leftovers, but that caution is ancient. For most of history, eating the wrong thing really could mean danger. So the habit stuck, even when refrigerators and labels made things much safer. Let's look at crowds. Some people love big gatherings, concerts, festivals, busy markets. For others, being in the middle of a crowd makes them uneasy, jumpy, or even panicked. It's not just shyness. Crowds can be hard to escape from. They block exits, hide dangers, and make it hard to spot what's going on. These feelings go way back, to times when being trapped or surrounded meant real risk. Even the way people sit in rooms shows these old habits. Most people pick seats where they can see the door, or where their back is to a wall. It just feels better. You might not even notice yourself doing it, but long ago being able to see who came and went was a matter of safety, not comfort. That's why so many restaurants and waiting rooms are designed with open sight lines. They make people feel more at ease, even if they don't know why. Let's get into technology for a second. Phones, watches, home cameras, all these gadgets are supposed to make life safer. In some ways they do. But they also feed those old worries in new ways. Have you ever checked your phone just to make sure you lock the door? Or watched your baby sleep on a camera, even though you were in the next room? Or looked at the map app to track a loved one's location just for peace of mind? These are modern ways of doing something ancient. Keeping watch, double-checking, hoping to prevent trouble before it starts. Here's another angle. News and social media. People say the world feels more dangerous now, but that's partly because you can hear about every bad thing, everywhere, all the time. Your mind is wired to notice threats, so when news stories pile up about disasters, crimes, or accidents, it feels like the world is full of danger. But in reality, most people live much safer lives than their ancestors ever did. The difference is, your brain hasn't stopped scanning for bad news. It's just picking it up from screens instead of the forest. You can even see old caution at work in how people build their homes and neighbourhoods. Fences, lights, locked doors, dogs that bark at strangers. Some of these are about privacy or comfort, but a lot come from that same old urge. Keep danger outside. Keep the group safe inside. Gated communities, neighbourhood watch programs, security systems, all of them are upgrades of ancient habits. It's not just about physical safety either. Think about how people handle money and work. Saving for a rainy day, storing food in pantries, making backup plans for jobs or health. These are ways of preparing for trouble before it comes. In the past, that might have meant storing grain for winter or keeping extra water for drought. Now it means insurance, emergency kits, or even just a spare charger for your phone. The same thinking, just new tools. Let's spend a moment on superstition and ritual. You might think these are just old stories, but they show up everywhere. Knocking on wood, not walking under ladders, wearing a lucky shirt before a big game. Some people carry charms or repeat certain actions before they travel, take a test, or try something risky. These rituals might not change the odds, but they calm the mind. They give a sense of control in a world that sometimes feels unpredictable. That's the same reason people have made offerings, said prayers, or chanted spells for thousands of years. It's a way to handle worry, to ask for safety, to feel like you're doing something, even when you can't see the danger. Let's look at animals for a second. Lots of people are still nervous around spiders, snakes or insects, even in places where there aren't any dangerous ones. That jumpy reaction is hard to shake. It's built in. Some scientists have even tested this. Show someone a picture of a snake or a big spider, and their eyes go to it faster than any other picture. The reaction is automatic. It doesn't matter if you've never seen a real tarantula or a venomous snake in your life. The wiring is still there. But it's not all about worry or panic. Sometimes these ancient habits are what help people stay safe in emergencies. Watch how people react in real danger, like a fire alarm going off or a car swerving in traffic. Most people don't have time to think. They just move, duck, run, grab what matters. That's the old alarm system still working even when the problem is new. Let's talk about medical worries. The world is full of warnings. Labels on medicine, signs in hospitals, instructions everywhere. People worry about germs, about getting sick, about strange symptoms. Some of this is new, but a lot of it is ancient. For most of history, getting sick could be deadly. So people learned to watch for signs, rashes, coughs, fevers, and to stay away from others who showed them. That's why people still get uneasy during flu season, or when someone coughs nearby, even if medicine is better now. You also see these old habits in the way people handle darkness. Even with electric lights, lots of people feel uneasy in the dark. They check that the closet is empty, that the window is locked, that nothing is under the bed. Children aren't the only ones who get spooked. Adults do too. And it's not just about monsters or ghosts. It's the old brain, still alert for what might be hidden, still listening for sounds that don't belong. Now let's look at culture and entertainment. Why are so many stories about danger, mystery or adventure? Horror movies, detective shows, survival games, all of them play with the same old alarms. Even fairy tales with their dark forests and dangerous strangers are echoes of those ancient warnings. People like to test their nerves, to feel a little scared in a safe place. It's like practice for the real thing, but without the risk. Let's get more specific. In Japan, there's a long tradition of ghost stories and summer festivals where people gather to tell scary tales. The idea is that a controlled scare in a safe place makes the summer heat feel cooler. In Europe, old castles and forests come with legends of hidden traps, haunted woods, or creatures that wander at night. In the United States, urban legends about hitchhikers, monsters in the woods, or things that go bump in the night are common. These stories change with time and place, but the pattern is the same. Warnings dressed up as entertainment. You even see echoes in language. Phrases like gut feeling, hair standing on end, something gives me the creeps, all are ways to describe the body's ancient alarm system. When someone says, "I just had a bad feeling," they're talking about a real physical response. Scientists have measured this too. The stomach tenses, the heart skips a beat, the skin gets sensitive. Your body is getting you ready, even if you don't know why. Let's not forget about dreams. Nightmares about falling, being chased, or losing your way are some of the most common across the world. Psychologists have found that these dream patterns are almost universal, showing up in every culture studied. It's as if the brain is running old safety drills even while you sleep. There are even modern studies that show how these old alarms affect daily life. For example, some people are extra sensitive to sudden noises or movements in their environment. Others are more likely to notice small details, like a bag left unattended, or a car parked in the wrong place. In tests, people who score higher on these vigilance traits are better at spotting real dangers, but they also spend more energy being alert all the time. It's a trade-off, safety versus calm. Let's look at relationships for a second. Jealousy, suspicion, checking up on people. These aren't just bad habits. They're old tools meant to protect bonds and keep the group together. In the past, losing trust or being left out could mean losing your support system. Now it might just mean an argument or a breakup, but the old feelings are still there, driving reactions. Even travel habits show these patterns. Packing extra snacks, double-checking your route, feeling uneasy in new places. These aren't just quirks. They come from a long history of needing to be prepared, of not knowing what you'll face beyond the next hill or city. There's even evidence in how people shop. Lots of people buy more than they need just in case. Stocking up on toilet paper or canned food when there's a storm warning is a modern version of storing up for winter or dry season. It's not just about the product, it's about calming that old, deep worry. Now, here's what's really interesting. Some of these habits can cause trouble, like anxiety, panic attacks, or worry that never really goes away. But they can also be helpful. They keep people cautious, ready to adapt, and able to notice when something isn't right. In fact, some of the most prepared, creative, or successful people are the ones who learned how to use those old alarms without letting them take over. So, what do you do with all this? You recognize it. You notice when you're reacting to something real, and when it's just your old wiring kicking in. You learn to pause, take a breath, and decide what needs action and what just needs patience. That's a skill people have been practicing for a long time, even if the world keeps changing. And if you think about it, something about this just stays with you. The way old habits shape new problems, the way a brain built for survival tries to make sense of city lights, car alarms, and news alerts. You can't turn it off completely, but you can learn how to live with it. Sometimes it even makes life richer, more interesting, more connected to the past. So, next time you check the lock twice, or get a chill in the dark, or feel nervous before something big, remember, you're not alone. You're carrying the wisdom of everyone who ever watched the shadows and listened for danger. It's not about being afraid, it's about being human. Now let's take this one step further. All those echoes, every jump, every double check, every story told at bedtime, they're signs that your deepest self is still listening, still learning, still trying to keep you safe. And tonight, as you settle in, you can let those old alarms soften. The world outside is different now. The old worries are just echoes. You're here and you're safe. So here we are, at the end of this whole journey through ancient worries, old alarms, and the strange comfort of knowing where those feelings come from. It's kind of wild, isn't it? When you step back and look at it all together, you realize something big. The things that kept early people up at night are still with us, just changed around, hidden inside new shapes and habits. The world outside looks nothing like it did for those first humans, but inside the same old system is working, ticking away, trying to keep us safe. Think about all the places these deep patterns show up. It's not just in the obvious stuff like locking doors or glancing over your shoulder at night. It's also in the way people learn, grow, and even connect with each other. That old alarm system isn't just about fear. It's about paying attention, about noticing when something's off, when things don't add up, or when a risk is worth taking. It's the first step toward curiosity, toward learning how the world works. If you look at the history of humans, you see that the same instinct that made people jump at noise in the dark also helped them spot a new food source, find a safe path, or notice a change in the weather before anyone else. The same edge that made someone worry about a sleeping child or a missing group member led to better stories, tighter groups, and new ways of solving problems. In a way, those old alarms were never just about danger. They were about survival, yes, but also about paying close attention to the world. Here's something that doesn't get said enough. Most of the time, those ancient habits worked. If they hadn't, Nobody today would be here to wonder about them. Look at how humans spread out from Africa to every corner of the planet. They crossed deserts, climbed mountains, sailed across open water, and built homes in the coldest and hottest places on Earth. That didn't happen because they ignored danger. It happened because they learned how to spot it, talk about it, and work together to handle it. Now, there's a twist to this story. The world changed a lot faster than our brains did. In just the last few hundred years, life sped up. Cities grew. Technology exploded. Most people don't face saber-toothed cats or poisonous berries anymore. Instead, the risks are things like traffic, online scams, or news stories from across the globe. But the body and mind still react as if the threats are right outside the firelight. That's why you get a racing heart when your phone buzzes with bad news, or why a sudden noise in the hallway makes you jump, even if you know it's just the cat. This can feel weird, even annoying. You might catch yourself worrying about things that don't matter, or stressing out over small stuff. But the truth is, that old alarm system isn't broken. It's just doing its job, sometimes a little too well. It's like a smoke detector that goes off for burnt toast. Annoying, but better than missing a real fire. One of the most interesting things about humans is how creative they get with these old feelings. Instead of letting fear run wild, people find ways to channel it. They create art, music, and stories to make sense of the unknown. Myths and legends aren't just fairy tales. They're maps of what people worried about, hoped for, and tried to control. Every ritual, every bedtime story, every warning passed down through families is a way of saying, I've been there. Here's how I handled it. And it's not just about avoiding danger. Sometimes these ancient feelings point toward what matters most. Think about the people you care about. The reason you worry when they're late or when they're sick isn't just habit. It's a sign of connection. That old alarm system is tuned to what you love. In a way, it's a reminder of the bonds that kept early groups together, watching over others, staying close, looking out for trouble. Those are the things that made survival possible. This is where things start to feel a little philosophical, but in a good way. When you recognize these patterns in yourself, you get a choice. You can fight them, or you can learn from them. Instead of pushing away every worry, you can pause and ask, is this my old brain talking, or is this something I need to pay attention to? Sometimes it's a real warning. Other times it's just leftover wiring, running on autopilot. Either way, knowing the source can help you decide what to do next. There's power in that kind of awareness. It means you're not trapped by old habits. You can thank them for what they've done, kept you safe, kept your loved ones safe, and then move forward with a little more freedom. It's like updating old software. The basic program is still running, but you can choose what to keep and what to let go. Another thing to remember is that you're not alone in this. Everyone, everywhere, has a version of these old alarms. They might show up in different ways, rituals, stories, anxieties, or habits, but at their core, they're the same. That's kind of comforting, isn't it? Knowing that the weird reactions you have, the sudden worries, or the urge to double-check, are shared by millions of people. By everyone who ever lived, really. And if you zoom out even more, you see that these patterns aren't just about individuals. They shape whole cultures. The rules, the laws, the ways people build cities or plan for emergencies, they all start with that same urge to keep danger outside and the group safe inside. Even the biggest, most complicated parts of modern life have roots in those old, simple alarms. Let's talk for a second about what it means to be brave. It's easy to think that courage is about having no fear at all, but if you look at history, the real story is different. Bravery is about knowing the risks, feeling the old alarms, and moving forward anyway. It's not about turning off the warning system. It's about listening to it, then making a choice. That's how new discoveries were made, how new lands were settled, and how families grew stronger. Some people worry that these old patterns are problems to be fixed, but maybe they're just part of the package. The same system that makes you jump at a shadow is the one that helps you spot a friend in a crowd or notice when something's wrong. It's what helps parents keep kids safe, helps friends look out for each other, and helps whole communities plan for what's next. If you look back at all the examples, old and new, you start to see a pattern. The mind is always scanning, always asking, is this safe? What's around the corner? What's that noise? Sometimes the answer is nothing. Sometimes it's something. But either way, the ability to notice, to wonder, and to react is what makes humans special. It's the engine behind curiosity, creativity, and the drive to make things better. So what do we do with all this? Maybe the answer is simpler than you think. Notice the old alarms, but don't let them take over. Use them when they help, and set them aside when they don't. Remember that every worry, every jolt of nervousness, every bedtime story about monsters or heroes is part of a long, long chain stretching back through time. You're a link in that chain. That's not just about survival. It's about connection. It's about being human, with all the quirks and strength that come with it. And as you settle in at the end of the day, you can let those old alarms fade into the background. You don't have to fight them or be embarrassed by them. They're just part of the story of people who watched the dark, learned from their worries, and found ways to make the world a little safer, a little kinder, a little more understandable. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the echoes of all those ancient nights, the soft sounds of people huddled together, telling stories to pass the time, the quiet moments when someone checked the shadows just to be sure, the feeling of relief when the dawn finally came. Those moments are woven into who we are even now. So tonight, as you wind down, know that those old patterns are still there, but they're not in charge. You can thank them for their service and let them rest. The world has changed, and you're safe. The old alarms can finally take a break. May your night be calm, your mind at ease, and your worries gentle and light. Sleep well, knowing you carry the strength and wisdom of all those who came before you. You're exactly where you need to be. Good night.